So I wanted to leave y'all with just this, a trigger warning that this session will discuss topics that could be potentially triggering. And if at any time you feel the need to speak with an advocate, please send a private message in the chat to me or to Mike for assistance, and we will connect you with someone as soon as possible. So without further delay, I would like to offer you this fantastic workshop, Changing the System to Serve Survivors. We have an amazing panel for you about how they transformed system response in Travis County. And I will turn it over to you, Jennifer, to introduce yourself and your panelists. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having us. My name is Jenny Ecklund. I'm an attorney at Thompson and Coburn, which is a law firm based in St. Louis, but we're in Dallas. This is my partner, Elizabeth Myers. Together, she and I and a group of other attorneys have been working with Mary and Marina, our panelists today, along with a number of other women who came forward once our lawsuit was filed in federal court 3 years ago. We've been at this work with these amazing women for the past 3 years. It has changed all of our lives, I think, in significant ways. But we're really excited to get to talk with you about what we've done and why we did it and how we went about trying something new to see if we could get a different result. So again, I'm Jenny Ecklund. I'm an attorney, so is Elizabeth. We're both based out of Dallas. In full disclosure, we're married to each other, and we have 4 children between us and 3 very large dogs. One of the actually very lovely things that came out of this case for us was getting to work together and becoming married last year. So that's us. I'll let Elizabeth introduce herself, and then I'll introduce you to our other panelists.
Hi, everybody. It's great to see all of you. Thank you for giving us some of your time today. As Jenny mentioned, I'm also an attorney. I've been practicing for 16 years. And then through this case, this case has just transformed my life in so many ways, including helping me find love for the practice of law again. And obviously finding Jenny as well. So we're excited to be here. I can't wait to share with all of you. And I know Jenny will say this again too, but we hope this will be an interactive experience. And so please feel free to send any questions you have through the chat as we go. There's no need to hold on to them until the very end.
The next panelist I want to introduce you to is Mary Reyes. Mary was the first survivor that I met in the course of determining whether and how to bring about this lawsuit. Mary is an astounding individual, and I'll let her introduce herself as well.
Hello, everybody. I'm Mary. I'm the lead plaintiff in Amy Smith versus the City of Austin. I have been in this space working with these lovely women for a good while now. I am a survivor of sexual assault, and I'm really excited to be here and happy to share all the things that we've been through together and to share the progress that we've made, especially in the City of Austin. So I'll hand it back over to Jenny.
And our last panelist, but certainly not least among us, is Marina Garrett. I'll let her introduce herself. She came to us just shortly after I met Mary. Marina was introduced to me, and so she's been with us from the very beginning as well.
Hi, I am Marina Garrett. I am a sexual assault survivor for about 6 years, and pretty quickly found my voice in advocacy. And have been fighting to change the system since then with these amazing women, and has led me to work in crisis centers and really just fall in love with the work, and has also led me to hope for a future in law. So I am so happy to be here today presenting with them.
just straight out of the gate, I thought it might be helpful for you guys to, for those of you who don't know what our case is about, to tell you a little bit about it just generally. And then I'm going to ask Mary to talk about sort of how we came to the point that it seemed that litigation was necessary. We filed on behalf of originally 3 plaintiffs a federal class action lawsuit in the Western District of Texas, so in federal court in Austin. And the complaint in that case was over 100 pages long and listed out everything that we knew that had gone on with regard to each of our clients and their experience in the system as survivors and dealing with law enforcement. Part of that complaint details the stories of their lives and their cases, and the other part details what we know in terms of policy and practice in the police department and the DA's office. The case is essentially a gender discrimination case, above all, in part because survivors don't have a lot of options legally in terms of the justice system. They're not technically represented by any person within the justice system when someone comes forward who has been a victim of a crime. So we set about trying to figure out how to do that legally. It has been 3 years, and you'll hear shortly here that the case has not gone very far in terms of the legal reality of it, but it has accomplished quite a bit in terms of the systemic changes we were hoping to see and some of the relationships that we were hoping to form that could better serve survivors going forward. So I'm going to ask Mary to talk a little bit about how she came to meet me, or how we got to this place where it seemed that litigation might be the only option left that she hadn't tried. So Mary, I'll mute for now and let you talk.
And I want to ask everybody to kind of be patient with me. I'm still on a healing journey, so this is a little difficult. But I'll start with, I've been doing this now since 2008. 2008 is when I was kidnapped and sexually assaulted. How I got here is a very, very long story. Just to kind of give you an idea of how many people I've actually reached out to get to seek help just within the legal system, particularly in the city of Austin. My case went through 3 detectives, 3 prosecutors, 2 district attorneys, 4 victim service counselors. I've seen numerous therapists, and it's been a ride. It's been a journey. The way that I met Jenny was once I found out from the district attorney's office that my criminal case was going to be dismissed. I did feel like something was wrong, and I needed somebody to help me. And so I reached out to numerous local attorneys, and to no avail. I mean, they would welcome my story. They would listen to me. They were excited, they were angry, all the emotions, but at the end of the day, nobody wanted to do anything, whether it be because it was like a political thing, or they knew somebody, and that's just the harsh reality of it. I was at the end of my, the trying of it, and I reached out to Texas Legal Services, and Texas Legal Services tried to help me as well. And then Jenny, how did we get to know each other?
We came to know each other because my understanding is that Texas Legal Services, because of all of the great work they do, takes grant money from the state and therefore cannot sue for damages. And so a private attorney became necessary. I may have offhandedly remarked in a conversation that I would be happy to meet with a survivor, and then they took me up on it and invited me down. So that's how we originally met, was because of the work that I had done previously in Austin. When I was a social worker, I still had a lot of contacts and folks down there who are still good friends and close family. So that's how I came to get involved at all.
Yeah, and I remember that day, Jenny, and we've talked about it before, that I told you everything, just like I had before to all the previous attorneys. I had to tell my story countless times, and I wanted that time to be the last time. And I told you that if you could promise me that you're going to take my case to as far as you could, that I would work with you and we would do it. And I made you promise. I don't know if you remember that. I made you stand up and say, please promise that you're going to take this as far as you can. And you did.
So from that point, our case was sort of born out of Mary's individual experience. As I started to do research in the community and to read all of the reporting and public documents that I could about how things had come to be as they were in Travis County, I was introduced to Marina. And so Marina became a plaintiff in the case as well. And I'll let her talk about what brought her to it and sort of her journey along the way too.
Yeah, so I was assaulted when I was 19 in 2015. And I was told by my detective that it would be 6 months originally before my kit came back from the DNA lab. And not knowing anything about the system, 6 months seemed, I guess, normal, but was a terrible time to wait. And then at about the 6 month mark, I reached back out and she told me that she had no clue when my kit would be coming back because the DNA lab had shut down. And that's kind of when I had a lot of those same red flags that Mary did, that something is wrong here. Something is going on, and that this is no longer like, this isn't just about me, that how many kits are in that log, how many kits are just sitting on those shelves. So about 6 months after my rape, I started reaching out to civil rights attorneys as well. I talked to attorneys at UT. Civil rights attorneys wouldn't even email me back. I couldn't get anything. I tried to reach out to the DA's office at that point. No one would speak to me. And at that point, I somehow came across TASA's own Amanda Lewis, who is an amazing advocate, and became aware of a city council meeting where folks were going to be speaking to council members about the DNA being shut down and what that was doing to survivors, and kind of was speaking through Amanda. I decided to share my story there publicly for the first time. And from that point, I mean, it was just that everything just took off from there. And I started kind of doing some news interviews, and that's kind of how I got out there to meet Jennifer and Elizabeth. And throughout that process and throughout all my advocacy, about 2 years to the date from my rape, my case was declined prosecution as well. And I just, I was heartbroken for a day. I remember, I had my detective called me and just told me over the phone that my DNA kit had came back. There was no DNA and the DA wouldn't be taking my case. And I had a panic attack right there. And I was just I couldn't believe that she didn't check where I was, that she told me over a phone call, that she had no clue where I was, if I was in a safe space to handle that news. And, I took a day to panic and think, okay, this is done. And then I thought, no, it's not. There's something wrong here. I know it is. I feel that there is, and I'm not going to stop fighting this. And then was reached out to by Jennifer and Elizabeth to ask if I wanted to be a part of this case. I remember I was actually in Europe. I was in Ireland the first time we had a phone call, and I was in the backyard of a friend's house in Ireland telling them my entire story, and just all of the issues that had happened with the DNA lab and the police department and the way the district attorney's office treated me. And it just, you know, all the advocacy I'd done to that point and everything that I had seen and heard from other survivors in the community, I knew that I had to be a part of this case to make change for other survivors and to figure out what was happening and what really was going on behind the scenes at APD and the district attorney's office. And it was just, I mean, I didn't even have to think about it when they asked me if I wanted to join the case. It was an immediate yes for me.
So obviously it's a lawsuit, so we're well aware that there are a number of people who would probably take issue with some of the allegations that we've made in the course of the federal complaint. But to give you a sense of what went into that document, I probably traveled back and forth from Dallas to Austin 20 times before we filed the complaint. It took 6 months from the time that I met Mary to build out a team and do the necessary research and interviews to ensure that everything that we were saying was sourced from a reliable source and that there was someone who could corroborate it. We were well aware that obviously a lawsuit like this would make the news, and we wanted to make sure that our clients were as protected as possible. So we spent 6 months getting ready for the filing so that we could support all of the allegations with evidence before we ever filed a paper in court. And that is how Elizabeth came to be involved in the case. Somehow I had convinced powers that be that this was something worth doing at a time that it was very important. I do want to give lots of credit where credit is due, though. Before I ever came along the scene, and Mary and Marina were involved with some of this as well, but there were advocates sounding the alarm for a very long time over some of the same issues. And it was because of the work that they did and the groundwork that was laid in that process that we were able to marshal information and get a lawsuit off the ground. So I say that in recognition of the fact that the lawsuit itself was the culmination of a lot of work that had been done before we showed up. And it was unbelievable, the years that had been spent, advocates speaking up, speaking truth to power. But the problem in part was that there was not a way to marshal survivors themselves in the same way that we then had with this vehicle. So I'll let Elizabeth chime in now about how she got involved and what the case sort of started out to be.
So I got involved, I was in the Austin office of our former firm. And I first learned about the work that Jenny was doing with Marina and Mary when I received a call from another partner to let me know that someone in Dallas was going to sue the city of Austin and the DA. And as a courtesy, they were checking in with all the partners in Austin to make sure that was okay. And so I asked some questions about what the case was about, learned generally what it was about. And I said, I'm happy for them to do it, but only if I can do it too. So I basically inserted myself into this process because just in the 5 minutes of hearing how bad the problem in Austin was, I decided that not only was it important for someone who was living in Austin to be part of the legal team, but that I wanted to do it because I couldn't unknow what I'd learned. And what I learned in the 5-minute discussion was horrifying in terms of the numbers of survivors impacted every year, the decades of just absolute failures by the police department and the DA's office, and the statistics around how many survivors who did everything asked of them. They reported, they cooperated, they sat through hours-long exams, and then they were just dismissed. And I couldn't unknow that. So that's how I forced myself onto the team. Shortly after that, the first lawsuit got filed. Yes, judges are an issue. Diana, you're absolutely right. I mean, part of it is we all grew up in a culture that minimizes sexual assault and rationalizes it and doesn't acknowledge the system's role in provoking it and maintaining it and excusing it. So as lawyers, I can't say any specific judge is the problem, but I do think generally judges, like everyone else, they need to be educated about the role they are inadvertently, I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt, playing in the perpetuation of the system. So shortly after I officially joined the team, we filed the original complaints. There was a very large press conference that Marina was part of, along with the filing of that. And almost immediately, and we expected that there would be press interest in the case, given who the defendants were, what the allegations were, and how detailed the allegations were. And within an hour of the press conference, the legal team just started getting inundated with media calls and also calls from other survivors who were learning about the lawsuit and recognizing for the first time that the experience they had had in the system was not unique, and that it was a systemic problem and not something wrong with them that prevented their cases from going forward. Which is how we came to meet the other amazing women who are part of our case now. And we quickly went from having three plaintiffs to 8 plaintiffs. We're now up to 15. And in the course of that, we've probably heard, 200? We've probably heard from 200 survivors. Many reach out and just want us to know that they're there. Some of them want to provide information that they think might be helpful. Others want to become very involved in the case. And all of those calls, in addition to confirming for each survivor that that they've done nothing wrong, and that it's the system that sucks. All of those stories universally boil down to the same experience for survivors in the system. So no matter what the details of the assaults are, every single person we've heard from who has been through the system in Austin says basically the same thing, which is no one believed them. They were immediately treated like they were the suspect. They were immediately interrogated about why they were where they were, what they were wearing, who they were with. They all had to push their own cases forward. They were not kept informed along the way. Detectives said terrible things. If there is, any investigation done at all, it's generally not done well. Any assailant who says it's consensual is automatically believed, and it doesn't matter what the survivor says. And then you get to the DA's office, and of the very small percentage of cases that get reported in Austin and actually make it to the DA's office, the vast majority of those are just dismissed outright. And even the ones that go through a process of being filed, and even for the very small number that get a plea deal, the vast majority of them historically are not for assault charges. They're for charges like burglary, or theft, or domestic incident, which is a problem for a lot of reasons. First, it's ignoring the truth of what survivors are being put through. And it also means that none of those assailants are ever registered as sex offenders. And so there sort of creates this spiral of the vast majority of them get away with it completely. The ones who are held to account for any part of the assault generally are not held to account for the sexual assault itself. They are therefore not in a registry. So when they do it again, it doesn't come up as a repeat offense. And the horrifying reality of that is not just that individual survivors are not seeing justice, which is on its own awful. It's that there are a lot of assailants, like thousands, tens of thousands of assailants who are never held to account for it in any way. And that just perpetuates a problem. So that's what we knew we were up against. And the issue with the lawsuit is, first of all, so lawsuits are terrible vehicles for change, right? Ellie, you're absolutely right. You know, sexual assault is an issue that uniquely impacts women. Not always, but the vast majority. And when men are sexually assaulted in Travis County, they do get a different experience.
That was one of the most striking things that we learned when we were researching for the case, was that we had heard rumors from various people about a trial that took place in Travis County related to a male victim, and that people had been overheard saying at that trial that he had done it to women before, but no one would have believed them because there was drinking involved. You know, they were acquaintances. There were lots of excuses about why the women wouldn't be believed. But the exact same thing had happened to the male victim. He was an acquaintance. He had been drinking at the assailant's house. The facts were the same, but you're right. How we as a society, or the system in Austin at least, was viewing that was that no man would ever say those things if they weren't true. But the 3 or 4 women who it had happened to previously from the same assailant, their cases were all dropped for various reasons along the way. And it didn't seem to matter what the reason was, right? So in Marina's case, they came back and said, there's no DNA, we can't do anything. But they had a perpetrator who had essentially admitted what had taken place. They didn't need DNA, right? For others, though, it would be the opposite. The DNA comes back at whatever point it does, months, sometimes years after the fact. And then they say, well, we can't prove lack of consent because your testimony is not enough. The bruises on your body were not enough. And so it's one side of the coin or the other, but the end result is that no one was being prosecuted, really. So yes, it is an issue of women's rights. And that's really how we wrote the lawsuit, was that it was a case of gender discrimination, because the way that female victims were treated was different than the way that male victims were treated. And the result in terms of justice looked very different depending on what your gender was when you were the person who had been attacked.
So lawsuits in general are difficult vehicles for policy and change, primarily because they are slow. They are incredibly slow. The judicial process, by design, does not move very fast. And we were also facing, in this case in particular, because we were suing government officials, we were facing certain defenses that they were going to invoke to try to keep us from getting information. And they were basically going to try to draw everything out as long as possible before they would have to send us documents, or before we'd be able to take depositions or talk to witnesses within the defendants. So even today, we're just past 3 years. We have not been able to send any requests for documents. We have not received any documents. We have not been able to take the testimony of any witness. And so we had to start trying to think of this lawsuit in two different ways. The first was the legal side of it, which was going to take a long time and we're still in. And then what could we do with this vehicle and the collection of voices that were coming forward to try to affect change more quickly. And that's what our plaintiffs and advocates in the community and other survivors in the community have put together. And so while Jenny and I have been pushing in as many different directions as we can to try to make life difficult for the defendants and get information, everybody else has been in this process of amplifying the facts and the truths that are in the complaint to affect some pretty amazing change without ever having had the opportunity that you need in litigation to get information. So that's basically where we started. Was we can't get information from them. We know everything's going to take forever. The press is very interested. You know, how can we push for change outside of the lawsuit? And that work really happened in a community that doesn't involve Jenny and me. We get to witness it from the outside, but we can't do any of that. That's a really good question, Diana. Do you mean in Travis County specifically, or do you mean just nationwide?
Well, we're having the same issues in the counties that I work in too. I don't think it's a county issue. I think it's a national issue.
Yeah, I think you're definitely right about that. I mean, sexual assault is not prioritized or taken seriously, or no, I mean, survivors don't get justice anywhere in the country. Austin happens to be among the worst, just from looking at the data. You know, I think the truth is the incident of false reports is so low, right? And the problem is that the narrative of false reports, especially by women, feeds into the worldview of the people operating in the system already, right? So anytime there's a disproven claim, which first of all, who's deciding that, right? That automatically gets put into the mindset of the system because they're already inclined to think that women in particular are lying about rape. And because so few cases actually go forward and so few survivors ever get justice, there's no other set of information that gets wrapped into the mindset. If you had a situation where 80% of rape accusations resulted in a conviction because people actually took the cases forward, then that very small incident of false report would at least have the chance of being overcome. But we're basically set up into a perfect storm system where, rapes that can be proven and can be proven fairly easily are not taken forward. And the very small set of false reports are sort of amplified as, well, yeah, of course, this is just what women do.
Ellie, I was about to say the same thing. I think when we're talking with law enforcement about what false reports are or unfounded claims, to use their terminology, you're absolutely right. The things that just because it doesn't reach the final result of a conviction has no bearing on it being a false report, right? And sometimes, many of the times, victims are recanting because they're in danger. I mean, y'all know this, we're preaching to the choir on that front, but anything that they could point to say, look, there was this false report, or there was this one, or, you know, those weren't really cases where the allegations were disproven at all. And frankly, a number of them weren't cases that were even investigated in order to prove them one way or the other. So it's intensely frustrating to know that, I mean, we've been able to get some information despite not being able to send traditional discovery like you would in a normal lawsuit based on the status of the case. We've been able to get some information through Freedom of Information requests. Part of that information has included, you know, offense reports from APD, different materials that were gathered in the course of some of the investigations. And you can see it from the first contact. You can see from the first contact on a dash cam video that an officer who seems to be a decent, normal human has already made a decision, already made a judgment in that moment that this is going to be a he said, she said thing. There's not going to be a way to prove it. And it's before he even meets the victim. I mean, it's in that moment, they're just so sure. And the case I'm thinking about, there was a huge amount of evidence, as it turned out, to prove the allegations. But that was in the moment, that was the thought. He called a supervisor and said, I don't know, we're going to be able to do anything with this one. It's going to be a he said, she said. Well, they all are, if you look only at that one little piece of evidence, that you don't take in all the other pieces. How could you possibly build a case? So it's at every point along the way. And I think that's the experience that Elizabeth was describing, that Mary and Marina and all of the women that we've come to know have had, which was at every step along the way, there were roadblocks thrown up before anything could even really move in any direction at all. And the imposition of those roadblocks, some of them can be understood, right? I mean, obviously there's plenty of crime in the world and there's not enough officers to handle it. That's an understandable reality. But what is not understandable is handling it in such a way that before the case even begins, there's already an impediment to it that's created by the system and not by the facts.
The other thing I just wanted to add on the he said, she said issue, because it comes up in virtually every offense report that we've been able to see, in almost every story that we've heard from a survivor. And the truth is, every criminal defendant in any situation, unless they take a plea, is going to say they didn't do it, right? You know, that's why you put them on the stand, or you put on other evidence, or you build out a case. So, you know, unless the person who's been arrested, let's say for burglary, is going to admit that they did commit that crime, if they go forward, that person is going to say, I didn't do it, or here's the reason it wasn't that bad, or here are all the things, right? So every criminal act involves what the defendant says and what the prosecution can prove. And that's the prosecutor's job. The prosecutor's job is to get underneath this largely self-serving story that every criminal defendant is going to put up unless they just admit to the crime. And so this elevation in sexual assault cases that, you know, it's he said, she said, well, so the testimony of one person isn't the only evidence in the case. And if the world took the approach that all you had to do to get away with any crime was just say, I didn't do it, then we wouldn't have any prosecutions of anything. And so it was really frustrating to me as I made that realization, I don't know, probably 6 months into the work, of the he said, she said is just, and I hope you guys don't mind cursing. If you do, raise your hand. It's just horseshit. I mean, the whole point of the adversarial criminal justice system is that one side puts on evidence to try to prove something, while the other side puts on evidence to try to disprove it. That's a non-reason to try to explain why the system is just ignoring thousands of women. Sorry, I went on a tangent.
We're good at ranting after 3 years of it, but the other thing that I think is important, and the thing that really lent itself to the strategy that we took in the case, is that we had women from all across every conceivable spectrum. You know, we had younger women, we had older women, we had women of every race, we had women of varying sexualities, we had disabled women, we had, you know, there was no.
We had a survivor in her 50s. We had survivors who were, you know, in their late teens when they were assaulted. It does not matter.
And while we have 15 clients, Elizabeth is right. Over 200 women called, not in part to share their stories because they wanted people to know that this was real and it wasn't just the 3 women who initially came forward. And in part because a lot of them had experienced assault so long before that no one cared about, that they just wanted to call and say thank you for elevating the issue. And those were the things that we would be able to take back to our clients as sort of evidence of success along the way, right? The case, for all intents and purposes, has been stuck for 3 years. We filed it, they moved to dismiss it. I argued at a hearing in December 2 years ago, and a year and a half later, we had a ruling, and then we took the case up on appeal. So other than that one hearing and all of the work that went into the appeal and the briefing beforehand and after, the case has just been sitting there. So outside of amassing sort of public awareness, which was what a lot of our plaintiffs did, and not just Mary and Marina, but if we brought our whole group of folks on here, A, it would be very hard to tell who was talking, and B, we would never shut up. But the beauty of it was that it created this community of people who finally recognized and could have it acknowledged that they were not isolated in terms of the experience that they had had, that nothing they had done or didn't do created the reality that the sexual assault case didn't go forward in criminal court. All of a sudden, those 200 women recognized that it wasn't just them, that this had happened to all the other women along the way too. And there was something obviously very sad and infuriating about it, but it was also an interesting thing to watch develop, the recognition that there were other women who had experienced the exact same thing and were treated the same way, and that wanted to do something to see the system change. So I'll let Marina talk more here in just a second about this, but part of what happened after we filed the case is that there was a huge sort of surge in public awareness. You know, the case obviously was covered locally in Austin. You know, we saw some press out of Dallas and Houston. The New York Times called and ended up doing a full page story on several of our clients. There were magazine articles, there were news reports. I mean, it sort of blew up. And then the challenge was, in the absence of a case going forward, how can you manage that awareness into a practical achievement? So while we were waiting on the case, could we still put these voices on the line to do some of the things that like TASA traditionally has been doing in terms of checking, you know, pushing forward legislation that helps survivors, pushing forward studies that would really make this problem not a question of a lawsuit, but a question of data, a question of facts. So I'll stop for a little bit and let Marina talk about sort of the practical pieces of how our group sort of pushed forward in the absence of the case moving.
Yeah, thank you. And I just want to speak to your point of the he said, she said. I mean, we were able to get my police report back from open records request, and, you know, just reading it, it's clear they're biased towards the moment they interviewed him. And he said, you know, that's not what happened. It's like nothing I said after that mattered, that my bruises didn't matter, my rape kit didn't matter, none of that mattered. You know, just the moment he said that's not what happened, it was very clear, just their bias that was written in the police report. You could just feel it in their writing, their disbelief of me from the moment that they met him. But yeah, I think that, you know, forming the community of the survivors, first of all, like Jenny was saying, it was, you know, even though this process of this lawsuit has been so traumatic and has added so much more trauma for all of us, to, you know, see the police chief in press conferences directly talking about us, and to see the previous district attorney speaking about us directly and saying awful things about us in the Austin Chronicle, you know, those added traumas and this added waiting time that is just so similar to your time of waiting for your rape kit to come back and all of that. It was also healing in the way that we did meet survivors that, you know, for me, like Jenny said, my DNA didn't come back, or my kit came back with no DNA. And I blamed myself for so long of, you know, why did I shower? Why didn't I immediately go? Why didn't I do this, this, and this? And blamed myself for that. And then meeting other survivors who did get DNA back and their case still didn't go forward. And so, you know, throughout this process, a lot of those questions of what if I'd done this or why didn't I do that have, you know, they have really just completely disappeared for me from hearing from other survivors that did those things and their cases still didn't go forward, that no matter what any of us did, our cases weren't going to go to the district attorney. The district attorney was not going to pick them up. And so I think that there was a lot of healing in our group of survivors of knowing that and hearing each other's stories and being able to find that community. But we were able to, you know, do a lot of organizing and raising a lot of awareness, you know, specifically around the district attorney's race. I think that was a great time that, I mean, we made the district attorney's race all about sexual assault. I mean, that was the main focus. That's what all the articles were about. It was the main question that was being asked at debates. I mean, it was all about sexual assault. And that was, for me anyway, an amazing feeling to know that we had made such a difference, that an entire election was focused on sexual assault. And, you know, it ended up going in our favor. And, you know, we have had small wins along the way. You know, the resolution that, again, Amanda Lewis did a lot of great work on with city council to look at exceptional clearance and to kind of evaluate how many cases have been exceptionally cleared, which is a whole other thing, but that are, you know, that APD is closing them in the wrong way to kind of pad their numbers. Just, we have had these little wins along the way that have come from a group of survivors, you know, realizing that, you know, how wrong we were and that none of it was our fault, and realizing that we could make changes if we, you know, joined together and did this. And, you know, even pushing for legislation and going to the Capitol and speaking at the Capitol. You know, we've done so much work and meeting with city council members, and it's been a very long 3 years and a lot of organizing and just so much work. You know, it's, Mary and I meet all the time to think what's next. You know, who are we going to talk to next? What council member are we going to try to get to understand what we've been through? And yeah, you know, I will say that it feels like, of course, you know, within this group of advocates that understand, we do have support, but sometimes it, you know, it doesn't really feel like we have a lot of support from the outside community. You know, I remember thinking that the New York Times article was just going to blow it up and that everybody was going to be paying attention and it was going to be this huge thing. And, you know, it still felt like it just stayed in the circle of advocates and survivors. And again, with the documentary about exceptional clearance, I thought, wow, this is going to be it. This is, you know, someone from Washington, D.C., investigative reporter. And it still felt like it just stayed in the circle of advocates and survivors. And so while, you know, we have made so much progress and done so much, I still have had this feeling that, you know, outside of our community, there is kind of still this silence around rape and this lack of wanting to advocate for survivors and to talk about it and to dig into it and to figure out what it means and how we make changes and how we get survivors healing and justice. And what about transformative justice? What about, you know, what do survivors need? You know, it feels like outside of the circle of advocates that do this work, that there is still a lot of pushback from the community from wanting to speak about it. And I think that that's been something that has been really difficult for me along the way, is not seeing that from the community and expecting to every time. You know, I feel like City Hall, in my opinion, City Hall gets packed every time that there is, you know, some sort of a vote on homelessness or something to do with the police. It gets packed. And of course, I want it to be packed for those things. But then when there's a vote for something about sexual assault, it's the same 15 people in the room testifying every time. And those are amazing 15 people. And I have, you know, worked with them for years and love them. But, you know, I kind of wonder where are the allies in this? You know, I do wonder. I do think that our case has gotten a lot of attention and has, I mean, pushed this issue so far forward and made so many changes in the system. But I do feel like in the community sometimes that there is still a lack of awareness of what's really going on, and a lack of wanting to help.
I think
Mary, I don't know if you want to, or Jenny, Elizabeth, yeah.
I was just going to say, I think Mary was prescient enough in the very beginning to recognize that this was going to be a really long, sustained haul. You know, before she and I met, she'd been pushing the same boulder up the same hill for 10 years. And it's exhausting for survivors, as you all know. And because it's so exhausting and because it can be so emotionally, I mean, draining is not even the right word, right? But people do need time to stop along the way, which is kind of the lucky effect of having a group of women who are ultimately pushing this case forward. At different times, as different people needed to step back from it, they could, and others would take the reins. And, you know, from a legal perspective, Mary was right to ask that question, because it was going to take years and it was going to be increasingly difficult, you know, with every obstacle that would be thrown up on the lawsuit. It was the right question, but it's hard to find people outside of the advocacy community who are committed to doing the work, who can keep it up for years at a time.
Yeah, and I do just want to echo that too, that, you know, because it was such a range of, you know, we know that sexual assault affects women of all ages and all races and all everything. We had such a range of skill sets within our survivors. You know, we have some survivors that are artists and some survivors that are, you know, into finance and like making, like assigning projects and project management. And then I myself got into the advocacy field, that we were really able to pull talents from everyone to be able to push things forward. And, you know, like Jenny said, when some of us are feeling our trauma a little bit more, we can step back and know that it's still going to move forward with the rest of the group, and know that we can step in whenever we're ready again. You know, it's been a very good group that has just meshed really well as far as being able to lean on each other and tell each other when we're too traumatized to do something or too traumatized to speak or need to step back from an event. You know, it's been really great in that, and even just being there with each other, with knowing that no one else would understand this thought that I'm having about my rape. And then you reach out to one of the other plaintiffs and they just get it and are having the same feeling. You know, that's been great. And yeah.
Mary, do you want to add anything on that front before I make Elizabeth talk a little bit more about what happens next for the case?
Yeah, I wanted to say that in this process, especially in the reaching out to the community, we've actually found like one of our biggest challenges is finding an effective way to communicate like all the nuances and all the different opportunities there are to make change, because there's so many of us, and the main problem is that none of our cases were prosecuted, but within each one of our stories, in each one, there's things in there that are horrifying, that come down to to the police department and how we were treated and cases cleared and so on and so forth. But like trying to communicate those things to the community, I feel like it shuts them down. Like it just automatically puts up a wall. So I guess I welcome the conversations of any ideas of how we can do that, like how we can effectively communicate the different opportunities that are presented here, that we can actually make change and progress forward.
You want to talk about what comes next?
Sure. So Marina and several other plaintiffs were instrumental in fundamentally changing the DA's office. I think probably the most effective way to actually get change is to switch out the person in power. And they were able to do that by making sexual assault the issue for that election. So I do think there's great reason to hope that that part of the system is at least now being looked at in depth and with an eye towards dismantling the parts of that system that have been in place for a very long time. And the team that the new DA has put in place there are probably very well known to many of you who work in the space. They are true experts when it comes to sexual assault. And that's a great place to start in terms of tackling and dismantling systemic issues, is putting the right people in charge. We also were able to settle our claims against the county defendants. After DA Garza took over, they reached out and decided they were tired of being in conflict with survivors, wanted to acknowledge the failings of that part of the system, undertake significant change, apologize, and provide some financial compensation to the survivors who'd been going through this process in the lawsuit for several years. So that was a very happy development that happened about 6 weeks ago. And candidly, if you'd asked me 3 years ago if the DA would settle before the city, I would have said not a chance in hell. But you know, things change. So where we are now is we don't have any more claims against the DA's office because those have been resolved. But all of our clients' claims against the city, who oversees APD, are still alive. We recently decided to refile those in state court, which is a better place to be as a plaintiff generally anyway, because we can get discovery more quickly. So all of those claims are pending and moving forward. There have been some public statements by a member of the city council about, potential settlement. And, that would be wonderful if we could come to an agreed resolution on the city side as well. The city has a lot of work to do. The vast majority of our plaintiffs candidly had very little interaction with the DA's office because all the cases were being cleared at APD, shut down prematurely, or the police were telling the DA a very biased version of what their investigations had revealed. And so, most of the problems are coming from the city. I do think it's great that the city is undergoing its audit, its third-party audit. I think it's awful that it won't be complete until the middle of 2022 now. I also think personally it's awful that they authorized $1 million to dig through cases to try to learn what their problems were, and they still haven't bothered to ask our clients what the problems are, because all of the things that are being revealed in the interim reports are things that our clients experience directly. The most recent revelation is that sex crime detectives haven't even been required to go to the scene of reported sexual assaults, which is absurd. And I wish I could say it was surprising. It's not really, given how many stories we've heard of survivors whose cases just were never investigated. So that's where we are. We'll keep pushing on the lawsuit front against the city. And that process will, if we need to go to trial, that will take another 3 years. So, we'll be in this process for as long as it takes. In the meantime, I know our plaintiffs and also other survivors and advocates are still doing work within the community to try to push things in the right direction. And I don't know, I'm an eternal optimist, even though this work has revealed so many awful truths, that I remain hopeful that we will get to a point where the city finally is forced to reckon with what they've created and to undo it.
Well, we will get to that point because, Marina and Mary can comment on our legal team's relentlessness, but the lawsuit is now pending in state court, and there isn't the same process for dismissing a case by the same mechanisms as it took in federal court. We filed in federal court because as a gender discrimination case, it's under, the legal theory is under the 14th Amendment of the United States Constitution. And we had an idea that they would move the case to federal court regardless. So we did that. What happened with the case when the judge dismissed it, he didn't dismiss it on its merits. He dismissed it saying that it was not appropriate for the federal judicial system to get involved in the state affairs of an issue that was so clearly of importance to the state. Now, I have my own views about the validity of that proposition, but the result is that his suggestion was go file it in state court. So we did. So we did that the day after we dismissed the county and the DA's office, after we settled those portions of the claims. So now the case is pending in state court. What will happen if there isn't effective movement towards settlement in the next few weeks is that discovery in that case will start, and they will have to start providing documents, and they will have to start providing testimony. And that will be an ugly process because of what's in those documents and what's in those dash cam videos and what's in, I have, as Elizabeth said, like I'm not surprised by anything I see, but I am shocked by it when I see it. It doesn't surprise me that it's there, but the things that are there are mind-bogglingly awful. in terms of how survivors' cases are handled and how survivors themselves are treated. Having said that, there's some forward movement, right? I mean, and it's not just because of the case, it's because of the case and other advocates, and it's because of other survivors or survivors' parents who have made it their mission to see that the system has changed too. I mean, it's certainly TASA's mission as well, but all of those things working together can create small and incremental changes, right? Like whether it's the addition or the creation of a soft interview room for APD that wasn't there before, that's an improvement. And we're marking those little improvements along the way as we go. And it can be very exhausting if you look at it from one perspective. If you look at it and think, oh, we filed all this 3.5 years ago and we really haven't moved at all. But the truth is, the ways in which change occurred were not about a judgment at the end of a lawsuit. They were about all of the little things that they forced, I say they, I mean our clients have forced along the way in terms of change. It was them showing up at a city council meeting and forcing through the resolution to audit APD's files. It was them showing up when the press called and asked, how could this be going on here? They showed up every time, and every time some wheel got turning that really will make a difference in the life of even just one person, right? If one person doesn't have to go through all of the awful things, that's better than where we were. And, to a single person among all the women who contacted us, every single one of them called and said they just wanted it to be better for the next person, for the next woman that this happened to. They wanted the system to look different so that they wouldn't have to go through the same things. And that has always been the motivation for all of our clients as they've pushed through this process, whether they could be open or felt comfortable talking with the press or never wanted to talk to the press, or whatever their feelings about their public use of their story at any given moment. That's all any of them really ever wanted, was to know that the system could look different if they raised their voice and made it so. I mean, I'm a very proud person to know all of the women that we've come to know in this process. And I think that this experience has changed all of our lives and trajectories in ways that we didn't expect for it to change us so much as we were trying to change something else. And it's just been the lucky result in most cases. Mary, will you talk a little bit about that process and your feelings on what was going to be required and how you feel now about whether it was worth it all this time?
Well, I have to absolutely say it's been worth it. When I first met Jenny, I was absolutely terrified because I'm such an introvert, and all of this has just been so devastating. I mean, it's a nightmare having to publicly say what happened to me. And I knew that I would have to tell my story continuously over and over, and I'm still not sure of when it's going to end. But somehow, somewhere at a specific time, it just kind of felt like I was passing the baton. And like Jenny said earlier, it felt like I was pushing a boulder by myself for a really long time. And then just all of a sudden something clicked and the stars aligned, and I had all of these women and friends that support me and carry the weight when I can't carry it. So yes, absolutely, it's been worth it.
Yeah, it absolutely has. There are times when it gets so overwhelming and you're like, it feels like we're never gonna get to a positive ending. I never, like Elizabeth said, I never would have thought we would be settling with the county before the city. I never thought we would settle with the county at all, where we were before DA Garza got elected. And it feels so surreal now, you know, to have made those changes and to have done this. You know, people have been asking me since the settlement, like, what does it feel like to know that you directly made this change? And I mean, it's just surreal, and it's just still overwhelming to me and a lot to take in. But it's absolutely been worth it. And like Mary has said, I have made, you know, lifelong relationships with my lawyers and these plaintiffs and advocates I've met along the way. And yeah, and know that we still have a long fight with the city ahead of us.
The hard thing, I think, beyond the hard thing from a legal perspective is that, I mean, who knows how much longer this will go on, but I did promise Mary I would be there until there was nothing more we could do, and I fully intend to stand by it. Having said that, it's a very difficult legal case, which all of our clients knew early on, and it's difficult, as you've heard them say, to find a lawyer who can take that kind of case. I do think the stars sort of aligned for all the right people to be involved at the right time for this to be possible from our end. But it's become more frustrating to me over time as a lawyer, recognizing that the kinds of change that we just assume that someone out there can and will push, because we're accustomed to seeing civil rights lawsuits filed by the ACLU or other groups that are mission driven. It's harrowing to recognize that as lawyers, those issues aren't always going to be taken up. So Elizabeth and I have sort of, as a side project, like tried to start putting together people who have similar interests and funds to help, so that the next group of plaintiffs has more access than just randomly meeting the right lawyer on the right day who had the right capital to spend, you know, because it shouldn't be that way. It shouldn't be so that any survivor has to call 12 lawyers before one of them says that they'll try. So it's a wrinkle that I wasn't really anticipating, coming to recognize because of the work that we've done, that there are people across the country. And you're right, it's not just an Austin problem. This is a nationwide problem. It's the way that people view women. It's the way that people view sexual assault that has to change for any part of the rest of it to change. But recognizing, because of some of the attention that this case got, that there are people who care enough to put their money where their mouth is in terms of funding, and introducing those people to the right people on the other side. It just never occurred to me as a lawyer. People always came to me and they were my client or they weren't. And most of the time they had to be able to pay me for me to be able to do the work. And it just happened that this is an issue that we cared enough about that we were willing to do the work regardless of where it came out, just to force someone to sit up and take notice. But, you know, despite the fact that Marina and Mary and all the others have been so resilient through this whole process, like anybody who comes to me about bringing a lawsuit, and not in this arena, but like in the general arena of my practicing law, I would tell you that I want to be involved in 0 lawsuits that are involving me personally. Like 0. It's not fun. No part of it is fun. It's always like people in your business, in your face. There's always something new to worry about. I like being the person that gets to help someone navigate that, but I would almost never recommend to someone that they take on a lawsuit. And so for these women to have willingly taken it on and been willing to shoulder the burden for each other and for others along the way to force some kind of change, it just, like, I'm not an optimist like Elizabeth, but it gives me a sort of renewed faith in humanity generally.
I want to make sure we get to this question because it's been asked a couple of times, which is, how can you help?
Yeah.
First of all, keep doing what you're doing. right? The fact that you're here and interested and already working in the space is incredibly important and meaningful. You know, the other thing is what I've learned in this process is I came into this assuming very naively that we would file this lawsuit, the horrific truths of what was going on would be revealed, and for political reasons alone, the county and the city would immediately react and say, this is horrible. We had no idea that this was going on. We absolutely are going to get to the bottom of this and upend this thing. Obviously, that did not happen. I still can't quite figure out why politically it didn't, because it seems to make sense that when you are given 100 pages of facts that reveal that your systems are failing, that you would undertake whatever you needed to do to change that, especially if it's revealed publicly and you are the people who are in charge of implementing those systems and protecting people and serving your constituents. So I still have no idea why this hasn't been politically activating for some folks who are in charge. So I think staying active in advocacy, staying active in politics, staying active as citizens, and I think everybody. I don't want to assume anything about gender identity, but there appear to be a lot of women on this call. Staying active as a woman in Austin who has horrifically high chance of being the victim of sexual assault and demanding better from the people who are supposed to be protecting you. I think all of those things are important, and recognizing that we are right now in a limited space and time on this very long journey to changing systems, and 3.5 years feels like a really long time, and ultimately it's not.
I would add to that, even though it sounds cheesy, I do believe that hearts and minds are changed one at a time, and just having the conversations with people who are not in your professional space, who are friends, family members, sticking up if someone makes a comment about Christine Blasey Ford or something, and opening your mouth and just telling them about the experience that or the experience that has been shared with you. I really do think those one-on-one interactions are more meaningful than we give them credit for. And it's only if we continue having them that we're able to force things on a broader scale. Marina?
Yeah, as far as on the plaintiff side, the plaintiffs ourselves are trying to really push council members to understand what we've gone through. We've spoken at city council more times than I can count. And at this point, it feels like they don't want to listen to me anymore. It feels like they don't listen to me when I go and speak. There's a handful of them. There's 2 of them that will speak to me, but I can't even get council members to meet with me anymore. So I think an important piece is, if you live in Austin, or even if you don't, letting city council know that they need to settle this, and that what this says to survivors in the community, that that they're letting this hang over them, and that they're fighting us back on this, and that they're fighting a group of survivors right now. I think that that's really important. And just like, especially what Jenny and Elizabeth said, I think to share it out. I think that the more people that know that this is going on, and that it's not just going on in Austin, none of this is, yes, it is, the numbers are much larger in Austin, and so much is going on in Austin, but this is going on in your county too, and in your community too. And Amanda asked how do others get involved in systems accountability. I think looking into the numbers in your county and what that looks like, and going to city council meetings and asking them, going to your public safety commission, asking them what these are, asking them, if you dig into exceptional clearance and understand what that is, finding out what percentage of your city's numbers are exceptionally cleared and pushing back on that. And yeah, I mean, there's a lot of ways to get involved in the system to hold them accountable.
I think, Amanda, on your question about what people should do if their cases are declined, I think the only thing to do is to ask for transparency and accountability. And sometimes that's not something that a survivor is equipped to do in that moment when they're experiencing, repeated and additional trauma. So I do think that there is a space for caring individuals, whether it's their profession or not, to be advocates for those they know and make the phone calls that the survivor doesn't feel up to making. Be a squeaky wheel sometimes. It's not always going to change the result, but it can sort of force an accountability that isn't always present. And if there's resistance to transparency or resistance to allowing an advocate in the space, then something's wrong. And those are places where once it becomes apparent that something is wrong, you can mobilize people politically around that problem. I mean, there's no one great answer to getting them to take more cases except to keep demanding it and not let up. This effort and all the work that all of you do is sustained work, right? It's not, you're not going to get a victory in 2 months and move on to the next hill to climb. This is something that's going to take years and years, and we're all aware of it. But the more, we were confronted with a situation where a pandemic hit right when something very important was about to happen with our case. And so then you're trying to figure out, like, how do you manage that in a news cycle that is 100% dominated by Trump and pandemic? Like, what do you do? And sometimes you just have to wait for the moment and be ready when it arrives. But yeah, I think the most important thing that you can do to help a survivor who is not getting the right answers is to stand next to her and demand the answers, which I know a lot of y'all do every single day. Thank you very much for having us at your conference and letting us chat with you a little bit. It's so encouraging to see so many of your faces and know that this work is being done all over the place.
Oh my gosh, thank you guys. You are incredible. I think the chat can reflect how much everyone was touched by your presentations. Thank you so much, Marina and Mary, for sharing your stories. Your courage is truly inspirational, especially in the face of such an infuriating system. And Jenny and Elizabeth, thank you so much for standing by these women and advocating fiercely for them and showing them what it means to be believed and supported. You guys are all creating pathways for survivors like across the country to understand, what needs to be done to change the system. So I applaud you. I think everyone here can join me in that praise and applause. And thank you so much for sharing your stories with us today. Really, really appreciate you. Folks, remember to fill out your evaluation form for this workshop as well as for the overall conference. Any questions, email conference@tasa.org. And thank you everyone for attending. I hope you enjoy the rest of the conference. Thank you again.